You got your new Cardone CV axle in the mail? Let me show you how I install it.
Neighbors, before beginning this job, there are a certain set of tools that you will need. On the left side here, I have your assortment of generic garage tools that you may already have already. For example, the hammer, ratchet, square head screwdriver, your 19mm box end wrench, a punch, some assortment of impacts, the smaller one, the quarter-inch impact, and this is a half-inch impact. And then getting more specific, you need torque wrench. Then you will need a pry bar with a curved head. This will more easily allow you to loosen the axle shaft from the differential case. You will need a 32mm axle nut socket. This is just a generic one. It's any 32mm to do. It's a this one is a star, but you don't need a star. Okay, this one all you need is a 6-point. Okay, and here is what we use to break open the lock from the axle nut onto the drive shaft. Okay, it's just I just made it out of an old wheel stud. Okay, just shaved it off to make it sharp, to be able to chip open the lock on the axle nut. So that's it. Really, if you do any kind of work on your car, you probably have all the tools up to here, up to this point. So really, there's only 1, 2, 3 maybe tools that you'll need in addition to your set in order to do a CV axle. So the first step here is to undo the axle nuts. There's a pinch in here. You got to take something sharp like a punch, and I use a sharpened bolt, and I'm just gonna put it in here and hammer it until the pinch is gone. Next, once that's sufficiently opened enough, it doesn't take a lot, but we're gonna use a 32mm impact socket with a breaker bar, and we're gonna try to open that axle nut. And if that doesn't work well, we take a half-inch impact to it. There we go. Not tough at all. Now we're going to want to take a punch, and since the CV axle is free now, take a punch and try to push this CV axle in through the bearing hole just a little bit, okay, just to loosen it up, to make sure when we have the car off the ground that this isn't difficult. So let's just take a punch and hammer it in a little bit, but not all the way in, okay? Now, once you've hammered the axle in a little bit, put the CV axle nut back on and use your impact to turn it out. It'll draw it out a bit, okay? So in case it's tight, this will loosen it up in the hole. Just do it a couple of times.
If you miss this step during the phase where the car is still on the ground, when you do it off the ground, it may be very difficult, and also you may pop the CV shaft out of its cup, and that will be trouble.
Now it's sufficiently loose. Let's get this car up on jack stands. Now, to do this job properly, you do need to get both front wheels off the ground. I know you're only changing one CV axle, but you still need to be able to rotate the wheels forward and back, and also be able to turn the steering wheel. So you need to get both wheels off the ground. The way you jack this up, if you don't have a floor jack, is to put the OEM scissor jack on the pinch weld. This is how you're supposed to lift up the car. And also the jack stand will go under these two big frame rails. You'll notice that if you follow the pinch weld and you move towards these two frames, this frame is strong. You can put your jack stand under this on this side, one under here, and on the other side of the car there's another equal frame rail. You can put it on that, and it'll be very strong. Now, my neighbors, the car is jacked up and securely on the jack stands. Okay, give the car a couple of shakes. nothing moving, then we're good to go. Next, we're gonna zip off the wheel nut lugs. And now remove the wheel. Now the next thing we want to do is take off these two bolts on the strut, because basically we're trying to make enough space. We're going to pull the knuckle down, and these two bolts are what's holding it together. But before we do that, we're going to clean up these bolts and put some white marker to make sure that when we reassemble, the alignment is correct again. Okay, but because this is a cam bolt and it's a special bolt, we need to realign it properly. Now, alternatively, some other videos show you can take out the ball joint, but in a home situation where you can't get an impact gun on this one, or you can't get an air hammer onto the bottom of this thing, there's probably likely no way you can remove this without damaging the ball joint. So I wouldn't suggest going for the ball joint. Go for the two strut bolts. Okay, I'm going to take some whiteout ink and mark 2 spots on that bolt.
There, that should preserve the alignment properly.
Okay, my neighbors, before we actually take these bolts out, I know we want to get through this quick, but we want to take off the 13mm bolt here. This is your brake hose. You want to take as much of the hoses off, like the brackets off as much as possible. You're all 13s, okay? 13, ABS sensor wire 13, and then the upper attachment to the ABS sensor wires is also 13. You probably won't be able to get the 10mm nut off the ABS sensor wire housing that goes down into the bearing itself. You probably wouldn't be able to get that out because it's likely all rusted in there. I wouldn't recommend it. So just take off those three points and we should be okay. Okay, that one won't go nicely, so we'll take a ratchet to it. Now let's take off the strut bolts. Now make sure if you're using an impact gun, you're putting impact on this side where the nut goes on, because you don't want to spin the other side. This is a cam bolt. It's not perfectly cylindrical inside there. You'll end up probably, wrecking the thing inside if you spin the other one. Make sure you spin the nut. Don't spin the bolt. Okay. So put your 19mm monkey wrench, box end wrench, on the bolt side, and have your impact on the nut side, and just bust it out. Okay. And there's the bottom. Repeat on the top. Now, my neighbors, I want you to notice something that's important when you put this thing back together. You notice the top bolt here, it has a washer on here. Okay, the bottom one, after the nut comes off, there's no washer. So when you put this thing back together and you think you're missing a washer, you're not. This is the way it is. Only the top bolt has a washer. Okay, so you may have to take a punch on the end of these bolts to get them free. So now you're almost ready with all those bolts out. You're ready to push that. Ready to take the CV axle out of the hub there. Now it will be difficult to get out because the fit is very tight. So what you're going to do now is get in your car, turn the key to the on position so that your steering wheel is unlocked. See, my key is in, ignition is off. I can freely turn the steering wheel. Now you can take the axle nut off once more with your hands. You just spin it here, down here, take it out because we already loosened it. And as you see, the CV shaft is still pretty tight in there. So we'll take a punch again just to knock it loose in there. Just hammer it out. As you can see, that's all it takes, okay, to loosen it up. Now, this knuckle should come free. As you can see, you pull on it, it comes down. And because we loosened all these, the wiring, we're not afraid of breaking them, okay? So it's still, now the only thing left to do is try to get that CV axle out of this hub. And it's challenging because there's not a whole lot of space in here. So we're gonna have to manipulate this one a bit. But first, try to get that CV axle all the way free out of the hubs. And then you could just keep hammering it with a punch in there until it goes. Okay? So I'm gonna take this and hammer it. My neighbors, do you see this tab right here? Focus, hold on. You see that thing right here? That's the wheel speed sensor. Now, as you wrestle this thing out, if you let go and this dings this, you will break it. So it's gonna look like no matter what you do, you cannot get this CV axle out. But I assure you, you can without undoing any more bolts. Basically, what you have to do is turn the knuckle. This is why we put the key in the on position to unlock it. Turn your steering wheel such that this knuckle is giving the most room at the back. Okay, so turn the wheel all the way to your left side, and that should free up enough space for you to get this shaft around here and out. Right now, if that doesn't work, basically what you need to do is, what I do is I put a big pipe on this on the top knuckle, and I pull it down slightly. The suspension should give a little bit, and you can pull this out at the same time. But you may need a partner to do this with you. One partner will pull, and you can pull out the CV shaft. Okay, so I'm going to attempt it one man. I'm going to try to turn the wheel myself and try to pull this thing down. Okay, it may not work, but let's try it. I hope you saw that. It worked without having to bend the suspension down. Take a look. You see? The axle shaft is out of its hole. And now that's left to do is we need to get under the car and pull the other end out. You hear? Do you see it?
Yeah.
The pry bar under here?
Yeah.
Okay. All you do is there we go. It's loose. Now we pull it out. Just pull it out. And there we go. Easy. So here's the new CV axle from Cardone. And you notice that the length, it looks a little bit shorter. Actually, it doesn't matter, because what matters is the compressed length. When they come in the packaging, the CV axle is already pre-compressed. If you compress this old shaft down, you will notice that they are exactly the same length. So now it's easy. Now it's time to put it back in. So when you put the CV shaft back in, it's important that the circlip, the opening on the circlip, is facing the bottom, right? And you see there's some oil in the transmission case there, in the diff case. I used it. I just took some of it with my finger, and I wiped it on the shaft. I used its own oil to lubricate. So now all we got to do is put it in straight in that hole, and you got to feel it, because there's no way you can see the splines go in. You just got to feel it. When it's in position, then you give it a push in. So I have it now right in the hole, but I haven't pushed it in yet. So gently slide it in as far as it will go, and rotate until you feel the splines engage. Okay. Okay, now I can't tell you how this feels. You gotta feel it yourself. Now I'm sure it's in there. So now all you gotta do is push it straight in and you should hear a click. And when it's in, it doesn't want to come out. Okay. Now before you put the CV axle back into the bearing hole here, the knuckle, try to clean out some of this rusted crap here. I guess it might help the longevity of your wheel speed sensors. All right, so clean that out before putting it back in. And also, we're gonna put some copper anti-seize on the splines here before putting it in. Okay. So here I'm just gonna put some copper anti-seize, just a little bit on the splines. Just paint it on, not too much, not as to interfere with pushing it into the bearing. So putting this back in might be a little tricky, okay? So basically what I've done is I put on a pipe right onto the knuckle here. You don't need to apply too much force, but the leverage helps, especially if you're doing it one person. What you're gonna do is turn the steering wheel all the way to the opposite side. So you're facing, if you're doing the right bearing, so you're doing the right CV shaft, turn it all the way to the left. So what you're going to do is, using this pipe, you're going to force this, the knuckle down just a little bit, enough so that you can put this CV shaft back into the hole there. So let's try that. Okay, now it's lined up with the hole. All we need to do is push it in now. So let's try that. So once the axle shaft sticks out a bit, enough for you to thread, take the axle nut, the new axle nut, and put it in. Okay. You can use your impact to draw the rest of the axle shaft all the way in. Now we put the strut bolts back in. Put a guiding pin in here. Push the bolt through. Put it back on. And this bolt is torqued to 115 foot-pounds. I'm not going to tighten it until I put the cam bolt back in, but just draw it in. Now the cam bolt, remember we marked it, so we got to put it back where the mark is. And remember, this is the one with the washer. So wiggling and it's in. Okay. Put in the washer and the nut. Okay, put the box wrench on this side. Make sure it doesn't turn. And then put the impact on. Okay. It's still lined up. Take a show here. Right, the marks are lined up, so it's okay. Now it's 115 foot-pounds with the torque wrench. There we go. Let's see if we change the position. Nope, they're still lined up. Next, we're going to put back our ABS wire, wheel speed sensor wires, and the brake hose bolts back on the brackets. Just use impact. So we're pretty much all done. The only thing that we need to do is tighten the axle nut with the torque wrench. This is 160 foot-pounds. And then we're going to stake it. See this little indentation here? We're going to use a punch to punch it in so that the axle nut doesn't accidentally come loose. Okay. So if you want to do this one single person, you can. To tighten the axle nut, I put a big pry bar across the studs here. And then also I have the torque wrench with the axle socket onto here. So as I tighten it, the pry bar will keep the wheel from spinning. Some videos have it where they stick a screwdriver or something into the vanes of the brake disc, but that's just gonna bend your screwdriver. So let's just do it this way. That's it, 160 foot-pounds. Now we gotta stake this thing in, right? So I like to use a square head screwdriver, and just one that fits right into that slot. So line it up here, and just gonna take a hammer and tap it in. Okay. And there we are, indented. Now it's all left to do is clean up the brake disc with some brake clean. If you've used greasy gloves to, turn the rotor as you manipulated the CV shaft. The car back on the ground. We put the wheel lugs back on. 80 foot-pounds torque. Now on the test drive, there's no more crunchy sounds made by the CV axle. Very smooth. Hopefully the CV axle will outlast this car. This car is 15 years old already. But I'll keep an eye on this CV axle over the long term and report back on it. Now this old CV axle doesn't seem to be in too bad of a shape. It had just started making noise intermittently. So, and I feel the joint here, it's still pretty smooth. So if I change the boot and re-grease it, there's a chance that this might be salvageable. If you'd like to watch me do a rebuild on this axle, please like and subscribe. See you in the next one.